Scrutiny Committee for People and Communities. And thank you for Cabinet members in attendance as well. The first item on the agenda is to appoint a new Vice Chairman, and I would like to propose Councillor Wood. Have I got a seconder, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second if that's possible.
Thank you very much. Any other nominations? No? Thank you very much. If you'd like to press your buttons to show approval of that recommendation. That is 11 in favour, none against and no abstentions. Thank you. So the next item is to note substitutes in accordance with Committee Procedure Rule 8. I have Councillor Cornish for Councillor Brown, Councillor Hitchcock for Councillor Mockford, Councillor Carvello for Councillor Clark, Councillor Marsh for Councillor Ellis, and Councillor Ziegler for Councillor Knight. Thank you. And do we have to recommend that as well?
No, it's fine.
No, it's fine. As fine as we go. So the apologies for absence on the people that they are taking the places of. Thank you very much. So item 4 is to receive declarations of interest from members in respect of any matter on the agenda. Does anybody want to? Councillor Whitaker.
Thank you, Chairman. I need to declare a personal interest in agenda item 10. I have attended the St Hill Charity Gala in the past, particularly in 2018, when the Church of Scientology made a donation directly to a charity that I was supporting in my mayoral year for East Grinstead Town Council. So I propose not to take part in the discussion or any voting thereof. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whitaker. Thank you. Item 5, to be agreed by general affirmation the minutes of the previous Scrutiny Committee held on the 27th of September 2023. No, 24th of January, that's the wrong item on there. Sorry, go back. To agree by general affirmation the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 24th of January 2024. Can members please approve those minutes? Agreed. Thank you very much. To consider any items that I have to take as urgent business, I have none. So we can go on to the first item 7, simpler recycling implementation and waste policy. That's pages 7 to 14 on your agenda. And I need to go to Simon for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. This report sets out the Council's plans to implement the statutory services set out in the Government's simpler recycling policy. And in summary, that means scaling up our 123 collection that includes food waste to over 69,000 domestic properties across the district by March 2026. Paragraphs 4 through to 12 set out the legislative framework and the guidance. We will also need to identify new depot space to meet the increase in the new statutory services, and the infrastructure need is summarised in paragraphs 25 to 27. All of that work also means reviewing our waste collection policies and the waste strategy to reflect the new service. As members of the committee will know, many of the services we provide, we work with partners, and it's no different for waste. We work with the Waste Collection Authority in order to supply this service to our residents. And the work of the County Council as the Waste Disposal Authority is critical, and they are also planning with us. And they are also committing significant investment to play their part and to play their role in the new statutory requirement. And the policy context is set out in paragraphs 28 to 32. For our council, we will have benefited from the decision the council took to trial the 123 service back in 2022 and also to extend it in this year. And that trial has been invaluable in helping us to understand and model not just the costs but the operational issues in delivering such a service. And it means that we've worked with West Sussex to identify what we need to do to scale up significantly that service. So it's been an invaluable experience, and we can certainly share with you the detail of that. As you'll be aware from the corporate plan and budget from 2024-25, this statutory service presents significant financial challenges to the council. And paragraphs 35 to 44 set out those financial implications. And that's timely, as we will need to consider these in the next cycle of service and financial planning for 25-26. The capital requirement is estimated at 1.4 million, and that's set out in the report, and is substantially a new depot. And the revenue shortfall is modelled at 630,000 per annum. Given the financial position and the data from the trial and the legal requirement to deliver this by March 2026, we're in a position to roll this out across the district towards the end of 2025, and that allows us a period of time to bed any significant changes in services and to meet the statutory requirement or statutory timeline. So it gives us several months to complete. And that approach is supported by West Sussex County Council. And the critical issue there is that the disposal authority needs to phase the implementation of the collection of food waste across all of its partners, so it can't hit everyone at the same time. So the timing of this is critical, not just for ourselves, but also for our partners. And we would welcome the views of the committee, and hope to answer any questions you may have. And my colleague Joe Reid is here, who has been running the pilot to assist. Many thanks.
Thank you, Simon. Like to press your button.
Sorry.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chairman. You're talking in, I think it was a paragraph you just mentioned in the infrastructure. We did identify previously, when I was in the Cabinet, a potential location up near the recycling depot in East Grinstead, as we do own land up there. And as we all know, land is very expensive. And if we own it, that brings the cost down somewhat. And it would serve the northern part of the district, because it's silly bringing somebody from, say, Ashurst Wood or Copthorne all the way down to Bridge Road to take all the waste and then go back up again if they've got to carry on. It's easier to go. I know it means added vehicles up there, but it makes sense. That's the location we identified. I think COVID hit. I think we stopped that process at that point in time. But I'm sure if you dust off the plans, you'll find that that's that part. I do actually have another question as well. On the same, I would say page, because there's no page numbers. It's number 23. It's 23A, and it's wheelie bin hangers. This may be a really daft question to ask, but are wheelie bin hangers, are they biodegradable? Because otherwise they just end up in the recycling. But it'd be nice if they were on biodegradable hangers. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. If I just pick up on the depot, and thank you for that information. As you'll be aware, we've been looking at sites across the district, and the decisions on sites, on possible sites for depots, are also, as you rightly say, about the operational efficiency. And there are some locations, if they're available, deliver us potential revenue savings and also reduce the requirement for miles travelled of fuel, etc. So in arriving at, in deciding what those locations may be, you're absolutely right, those considerations have to take place, including the ownership of the land and any planning decisions that are required. I would add that, although not in the paper, any investment in depot and any expansion of the service does also mean that there are new jobs that will come with this expansion, and that's important again for our economic development. And I'll ask my colleague Joe to answer the question about the hangers. Joe.
So no, the hangers that we supply aren't currently compostable. They have a small layer of laminate. That's primarily for practical purposes. It's just easier to hang on the bin. It also means they last longer in wetter weather for a couple of days if people leave their bins out. And it also helps people keep them for longer. So if we put dates on them, things like that, it means they can easily put them on their fridge or something. So it's for practical reasons.
Good answer. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions to ask? Do you want to say anything? Councillor Hitchcock, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Just in the same area, paragraphs 40 through to table 4. At the moment, we're looking at the 1.4 million perhaps being offset by income, which is from government. What happens if that income from government is absolutely minimal or it doesn't exist? Where are we financially?
So currently, we're looking at a shortfall of 630,000. There's a mix in terms of what the government provides. So they provided capital, but that capital can't be used for a depot.
Yeah.
That helps us, but there is no indication of any revenue funding that will be coming our way at this point.
Okay. And the other question I'd like to ask, if I may, Chairman, we're going for a 1-2-3 system. What if our funding, if any, depends on us actually operating a 1-2-2 system? Where are we then?
That's a very good question. You'll be pleased to know that we talk to DEFRA regularly, and we are confident, given the legal position that, and the evidence that we've collected, that we're able to continue to provide a 1-2-3. And you'll be pleased to know we're not alone in that. There are a number of other authorities that also do that. And that evidence base comes from the council's foresight in having a trial, so we can point to all the data that shows this is not only the most efficient way of doing it, it also delivers us recycling levels that are way beyond the 1-2-2 method that's used. My colleague Joe can talk to you in more detail about the learning from that pilot. So we're confident this is the right way to proceed, and in discussions with DEFRA, we're confident that funding will be delivered.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pascoe.
Thank you. Yeah, looking at the feedback from the trial period, there's some really positive figures where for those in households, the rate has increased quite impressively, but for those in flats, it's not increased quite as dramatically. You've highlighted that in a different colour within the report itself. I'm wondering if there's any strategy around what can be done to improve the recycling rate within flats and what kind of the barriers are that maybe councillors could help to overcome.
Yeah, so I think the results that we saw in flats were as expected. They are a harder to engage section of our community. They're quite transient, so people don't tend to stay in situ for very long. So it means we have to continually communicate. I think the ambers that we're seeing there is still an improvement in the way that things were before, but just not as much as we'd anticipated. But I think what the trial has done is kind of reinforce some of those things that we already knew about continually to engaging with residents, but also some of the managing agents as well, just to continue to communicate about the service.
So is that, just my question is around what is the strategy for engaging people that live in flats more? You mentioned communication. Are there some things that are more effective or less effective, just if there's any more detail there? Or?
Yeah, so we can use all of the materials that we've done, so bin hangers, letters, that sort of thing. We also tend to put posters up in bin stores as well. We also regularly engage with managing agents who will send out information to new residents, existing residents, about ground rent, that sort of thing. So we use every single available opportunity besides our traditional methods of communication to communicate with residents in flats more often.
All right, thank you. I do have another question, or I can, just around, I guess one of the benefits of food waste recycling is less goes to landfill. And I'm aware there's a landfill tax that's paid based on how much we send to landfill. So more food waste being sent to anaerobic digester and less going to landfill is a cost saving. I'm just wondering, do we get any of that back? Do we see that, or does that sit with the county council as the disposal?
So I think Simon sort of outlined in his opening statement that there is significant financial investment that West Sussex County Council are making in some of those infrastructure changes that they're required to do to enable us to process the waste. So we're not anticipating any savings as a result of processing the food waste differently, because there is a significant financial outlay for our colleagues.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. And councillor Cornish.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to see this set out. I just wondered, there are various different implications mentioned further down the report. I just wondered, is it possible to also frame the implications in terms of our sustainability report as well? Because I fear that there are things that we could be shouting about through that angle. And I know that we are talking about it in terms of landfill and that kind of thing, but in terms of how that feeds into our overall sustainability plan, I think there could be more said about that, because I think it would be really useful to know how that sits before this is implemented and how it looks afterwards. So I just wondered if that's an option.
Yes, thank you. So the sustainability targets that this is achieving is within our sustainable economic strategy as well. So the two are linked, and that's partly the reason, both not just for the pilot, but also retaining 1, 2, 3 and looking at the recycling rate. So those two strategies do link together. And when we review the policies, so when we've recommended in 3, small 4, the need to review the existing policies, that will also refer to the sustainable economic strategy and identify the PIs will show the change that we've achieved through this. I think it's also important to say, and I know Joe talked about it earlier, we've learnt a lot from implementation of 1, 2, 3, and what's important and is set out in the paper on what we've learnt, so I'm trying to remember the paragraph, we'll continue to do that. We can and should continue, so from paragraphs 21 to 24, we'll continue to learn about the operational delivery of this service as it scales. So the purpose of the pilot wasn't just to test what it would be like for a number of households, 3,000 odd households. It was also to test how do we scale this in the most efficient manner across different properties. So as you'll be aware, and as this committee will be aware, the way in which we've chosen the location of those properties is critical, so we can test out what is it like for flats, what is it like for dwellings in towns and in rural areas. And that gives us invaluable information to understand not just the cost of scaling, but what that's likely to mean on our data in terms of recycling.
Councillor Carvalho.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Given that the overall aim is to have a national standard, is there going to be any scope for cross-border cooperation between West Sussex and East Sussex? I'm thinking of particular, especially as we are very close to the East Sussex border.
Yes, there is already cooperation. So to some degree, certainly within West Sussex, so there are certain locations where it's better for us to collect the recycling and waste than it is for the neighbouring authority, and there's some arrangements around that. We don't currently have that, as I understand it, although Joe may correct me, for East Sussex. In terms of standardisation, some of the work on the Simply Recycling policy was to provide more standardised services across the whole country, as you rightly say. And so when we look at the policies that we work up and the strategy we work up with neighbours, there is a link between them all. And I also expect that we're many years away from that, the market will mature in this area. So again, you'll see more standardisation as that will provide operational efficiency.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was very pleased to see under 34C that the customer satisfaction is very high, so that's important as well, I think. Thank you. Okay. Oh, you want to come back? Yes?
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
could I ask just one more question actually on the satisfaction survey? What proportion of the households were in flats? Because they seem to engage not as well as those who were in households. So I want just, because it's quite positive findings, but I want to see if that's weighted more to households that perhaps engaged with the service more positively.
Yeah, so I think, as we said, we had over 3,000 people respond. I don't know off the top of my head what proportion of those were from flats, unfortunately.
Is the survey data available to councillors?
I think we should be able to determine that proportion.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, if there's nobody else, can we have, go to the committee recommendations to support the intention to roll out of the 123 collection service across the district, to note the requirement for additional depot space to support the provision of new statutory services, to note the current financial modelling and the need for this to be considered during the budget setting process and corporate plan for 2025-26, and to note the need to review the existing household rubbish and recycling collection policy and waste strategy. Can you show on your buttons, please? So that's 11 people in favour, none against and no abstentions. Thank you. So we go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the review of the housing allocation scheme consultation. And over to Simon Hughes again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So the report provides committee with information on the work of officers to review the council's housing allocation scheme, and that's in the context of legislative requirements, government guidance and case law. As you'll be aware, each local authority in England must have a publicly published scheme for the allocation of social housing, and councils can only allocate housing in accordance with that scheme. An allocation scheme sets out the council's priorities as to how social housing in Mid Sussex is allocated, who is eligible and qualifies for social housing, and the procedure to be followed in the allocation of social housing. The allocation scheme was last reviewed in 2019, and as I said earlier, we need to review it to ensure compliance with legislative changes. The context and background for the changes is set out in paragraphs 4 to 7, and paragraph 8 highlights the recommendation to proceed with consultation to ensure the council complies with those legislative changes and importantly achieves the objectives of the council's homelessness and rough sleeping strategy. Appendix 1 summarises the proposed changes, and Appendix 2 shows the proposed housing allocation scheme policy changes, and they're highlighted in different colours so that you can track them through. Committees asked to consider the proposed changes. Once the consultation is concluded, if any responses necessitate changes to the proposed policy that you have in Appendix 2, then this will be reported back to this scrutiny, and this will provide the opportunity to amend any recommendation provided to Cabinet as required. So the consultation and government process is set out in paragraphs 9 to 13, and we'd welcome any questions or observations from the committee. Many thanks.
Thank you, Simon. Do we have any questions?
It says page 32, but can't find it.
I'll go to Councillor Hitchcock first then.
Thank you.
Will you find it?
I found it quite a difficult report to read, and I learned quite a lot by reading it. One thing that puzzled me a little bit was the item 11.4 on page 40, which is the non-qualification depending on what salary you have. And I can't see anywhere where we're looking at salaries which are net salaries. Is that a net value salary after tax? In that band, the LHA yearly rate times 4 household income threshold. Because if it is, then I don't think in Crawley Down, my constituency, anybody can afford any of those range of properties at those thresholds. And I'm wondering how they're arrived at, please.
So the LHA rates are, as you know, set nationally, and that's the standard way of calculating, the government calculating how much they think each household spend needs to be. What we've had in, the reason for this amendment is that in the past we've had a blanket cap of 60k, and what that doesn't reflect is that for a larger household size, you're going to incur more costs. It's going to be more expensive. So keying that against LHA rates is the national standard, and that's what we've brought in as per the guidelines. If you want more details of how that works and how the maths works on that, then I'm happy to provide that in writing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carvalho?
Thank you, Chair. I would really just like to say thank you for explicitly mentioning the armed forces personnel. I think this is really important that this is included and defined, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh?
Thank you, Chairman. I found it now. It's on page 59, despite it says in the thing. It's on page 32. It's the transfer request, and no doubt you've been in council when I've asked the portfolio holder on many occasions of people within my ward and his parish that who have live in 3 or 4 bedroom houses and wish to move down to 1 bedroom, and they found that they just cannot get satisfaction. I've actually raised it with Simon on more than one occasion as well. So I'm glad that this is going out to consultation for this, because I do believe that that people need to know if they live in a bigger house and they do have the option, and it's going on to the band A, which I assume is the highest, so they can get changed down. That is excellent. Now, my next question, the follow-up question, Chairman, is the people who could make use of this, are they going to get involved in the consultation process? Will letters go out to these people? Because a lot of them, should we say, are our poorer citizens of mid-Sussex who don't necessarily have the skills and the internet to fill in these type of consultations. I know of 2, possibly 3 in Turners Hill myself, and 1 in my own village who wish to move down, change down, but every time they've tried, they've been rebuffed. So I'm really pleased if we could, and also how are you going to consult with the people who live in these houses? Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. The consultation process is set out from paragraph 9 to 13, and because of the legal framework around this, and also that the government have indicated they'll be doing a further review of allocations at some point in the future, what we're proposing is that whilst there's no statutory responsibility to consult wider than the social housing providers, we're proposing to focus our consultation with them in order to bring in these statutory and regulatory changes. But that doesn't preclude at some point in the future, once we're aware of the government intention around allocations policy, to then review in that context. And that may require a wider consultation. But the consultation we're proposing is set out in paragraphs 9 to 13. Do you want to add anything?
Chairman, can I come back, please?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see that, and it's good, but there are, like I mentioned, there are those who don't have the means to be able to respond to that consultation if they're not connected to the web, and stuff like that. I'm championing the illiterate when it comes to computers, and I put my hand up on that one. They need help. They need like a physical piece of paper, so then they can go, oh yeah, I'll do that, and send it back in, because it's always been, we've always provided 2 options on that. So, I mean, we're trying to go digital, but not everybody is capable. If you gave my mum a computer, she wouldn't know what to do with it, apart from put flowers on it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor Marsh. Just for clarity, are we referring to section 28, the transfer of applicants section?
Primarily, well, That fills my inbox more than.
So as you'll see, there's no actual highlighting in that section, which indicates that is current policy. So I think probably what we need to do is have a chat about those cases that you've got and where you see, and perhaps a wider conversation about raising awareness of what people can and can't do and how to do it. So I'm happy to pick that up outside of the committee, and happy to work with councillors and members on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cornish.
Thank you. It's just a question about refugees, actually, because I know, obviously, the county, I understand, have responsibility in that regard. Is that correct? And I just wondered if there's any crossover at all with this and the county with regard to refugees.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. The work that the county does is very specifically targeted and very specifically orchestrated by the county, so this wouldn't cross over necessarily with the county's direct intervention work, but this would pick up any and all other cases that we take up. And indeed, we do our own work with other cohorts that that has other stipulations and other routes to follow. So there's no direct correlation with the county's direct intervention work in this case.
Thank you.
Councillor Egerton.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just with regards to 11.5, applicants who own accommodation have a legal interest in home ownership or have the final resources to own accommodation do not qualify to be on the housing register. I'm just a little bit concerned that whole section there, if a victim of domestic abuse is reading it, suddenly feels like if they happen to be named on a mortgage or a deed, may feel as if the doors are not open to them. Please reassure me on that particular point.
I think if it's okay with yourself, that I'd probably come back to you in writing on that point, because I'd like to consult with the policy experts.
That's
on that and
absolutely fine, but you can understand why I'm deeply concerned about that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Judy.
I might be able to help out a little on that, just to reassure you that if somebody is the subject of domestic abuse, they will most likely be directed to make an application to the council under the homeless persons legislation, and their application will be considered as part of that. And you will see that there are provisions for allowing people who have come through that route onto the council's housing register through the allocations policy, so they are catered for, and that would not preclude them from being considered. They would be considered through a different route initially.
That's very reassuring, thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Any more points? No, thank you. Right, we turn to the recommendations. The management team are recommended to agree to the consultation to begin on the proposed changes to the council's housing allocation scheme set out in Appendix 1 and the scope. Yes?
Says printed, can you just say instead the committee are recommended to just start again?
What, and read all this?
No, just it's all right. Just change the word, just say the committee are recommended to.
The committee are recommended to agree to the consultation to begin excuse me, on the proposed changes to the council's housing allocation scheme set out in Appendix 1 and the scope of the consultation. 2, confirm agreement that Cabinet and opposition leaders be briefed on the changes to the allocation policy. 3 is out because that's out of date. And subject to the above, the Scrutiny Committee will be recommended to recommend that Cabinet agree the changes to the allocations policy as proposed and note the commencement of the consultation and agree to receive a follow-up report if any significant changes to the proposed policy are made as a result. Can you please vote? Right, that's 11 for yes, no noes and no abstentions. Thank you. Right, go to the next item on the agenda, which is Service and Financial Planning Guidelines for 2025 to 26. I go to Louise Duffield, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So one of the papers that we've had this evening is a really good example of how service and financial planning starts as soon as the last budget is set, because the piece of work around the rollout of 123 is something that we've been modelling since we had that legislation, and I'm really pleased that we found out that we can do 123, not 122, else the number of 600,000 would have been a heck of a lot higher. So this process started from Cabinet's point of view back in July, when it received a context paper in terms of the financial landscape. And in September, Cabinet also agreed, having consulted with group leaders, to establish a cross-council executive working group to support the development of the budget. And that enables the whole council to be involved in that process. And I thank the group leaders who've already given me those volunteers. But it also enables this committee to focus on its work that it will do in January. So the paper itself sets up that governance framework and that timetable for doing so. So the full service and financial plan will be with you on the 10th of December for your consideration on the 22nd of January. In terms of the position that the paper sets out, we know from when we set the budget last year that we saw over the coming years that there is a structural gap. We've separated in the paper, as we did in the budget, the known structural gap and the spectre looming of business rates reform. And what we know so far of the new government is that effectively all the advice and noise we're hearing is that we'll get a rollover settlement this year. But we have been promised, if that's the right word, that from future years that we will have longer term planning, which we would wholeheartedly welcome. But for this year, we are likely to get the settlement after we've published the budget for consultation. So we'll be working on all of the assumptions of our advisors, and we will be very much expecting similar to last year's, because in terms of timing, it's unlikely they'll be able to consult on anything more substantial. So you've got a good set of the working assumptions that we're working under, and this was really to whet your appetite for the challenge that awaits us over the next few months. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Louise. Any points anybody wants to raise? No? Right, okay. Go straight to the recommendation then, which is 1, endorse the guidelines set out within this report, including the timetable and terms of reference set out at Appendix B. Use these principles in scrutinising the 2025-26 corporate plan and budget. If you could vote with your screen. Right, yes, 11, no, nil, and abstains, nil. Thank you. Right. Next item on the agenda is Saint Hill Public Spaces Protection Order. Thank you, Councillor Whittaker. Members have received the officer's report with this agenda and have been circulated additionally with all the correspondence sent to us by Peter Hodkin, the Saint Hill solicitor. I hope you have had the opportunity to read all these papers. Tonight we're only discussing the process that Mid Sussex will carry out in gathering evidence in a fair and impartial way. This process will benefit both sides and will form the basis for a decision to be made by Cabinet in due course. Thank you. So I go to Judy, please, to introduce this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think the report is self-explanatory. As the Chair has said, this is a report responding to Odkin and Company solicitors who, on behalf of their clients, the Church of Scientology, Religious College East Grinstead, have asked for a Public Spaces Protection Order, a PSPO, to be made to prohibit any demonstrators from conducting their activities on the public highway, Saint Hill Road, immediately outside the church. The report sets out the process the Council must follow in considering this request. The committee is not being asked to make a decision this evening. As set out in paragraphs 13 to 15, the committee is asked to note the process and that the Cabinet will be asked to make a decision balancing the rights of protesters against those attending the church, and to do this, the Cabinet must be satisfied that it has taken proper and proportionate steps to understand all the issues and options before it makes any decision. The Council has a wide discretion to decide whether to make a PSPO. As summarised in paragraph 10 of the report, in considering whether to grant a PSPO, the Council must consider what is reasonable, justified and proportionate. The Council is required to consult whatever community representatives the Council think appropriate, including the landowner on whose land the PSPO would cover. In writing this report, officers have taken advice from a specialist counsel who has experience of working on and defending protest PSPOs. We're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Would you like to speak, Kevin? Well, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just thought it'd be useful to provide the committee with a little bit of legal advice, just to sort of contextualise the debate for tonight, really. So you've heard already that committee tonight isn't making the decision as to whether the council should make a PSPO. This is about the process which informs what the cabinet ultimately decides to do. So the exercise of making or making a decision about the PSPO is going to involve the council balancing the protected legal rights of two distinct groups, the rights of assembly and expression for the protesters, and the rights of freedom of religion for those attending the church, which is a legally recognised religion. The law on PSPOs requires the council to have particular regard to the rights of freedom of assembly and expression. And it's really important to note the scope of the paper and the debate for members this evening. It's entirely normal where there's a locally controversial matter, and here that's apparent from the existence of the protests, that members in this chamber may hold differing views. It's really important, however, to frame the debate not around those views, whether you agree with the protesters, agree with the church, or are neutral, but to frame it around making sure that the process that the council adopts is legally robust and gives the cabinet the best available evidence upon which to base its ultimate decision. PSPOs are designed to control activities which have a detrimental effect to the amenity of people within an area. It's not about being for or against a position, but whether the activity in question is, as a matter of fact, occurring to the scale which is being alleged, and whether it's having the detrimental effect which is also alleged. The process which is before members for consideration therefore seeks to evidence each of those matters so that the Cabinet can be confident it's basing its decision on robust and comprehensive evidence. Hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chairman. I have read and reread this report, and together with the information that has been submitted by the Church of Scientology, and I think the officers presented us an excellent report, and this is just the start of the process, and I endorse and propose that the recommendation be sent to Cabinet Consultant making the PSPO. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else want to raise anything? No? Yes, I'm looking at him, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo the remarks from Councillor Marsh. It's a very difficult process that's at play here, but the officers have done a very good job in developing a process by which Cabinet can come to its decision. It's the very best in what are extremely difficult circumstances.
Thank you. Right. Should we go to the recommendation then, if there are no other comments? Thank you. The committee are asked to note the contents of the report, note that Cabinet will make a decision following appropriate process, endorse and recommend to Cabinet to consult on making a PSPO. And can you vote with your buttons, please? Somebody hasn't voted? Okay. Oh, it's Councillor Whitaker, thank you. Yes, 10 for no, 0 for no, and abstain then. Thank you very much. Might go to item 12, questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10.2, due notice of which has been given. I have none. Oh, sorry, I've missed the work programme, very important. Let's go to that, yes. Right. Right. Can I go to Lou? Thank you very much. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hutton. So the work programme is before you also gives us an opportunity to refresh ourselves with the range of tools that are available for scrutiny, and I would encourage you to use them should you wish to, in terms of briefing notes and so on. In terms of the formal proposed programme, as I mentioned earlier, the next one is the big one, and the budget in January, and then we've got our Equalities Annual Review after that. So happy to take any questions as ever.
Any questions? Councillor Marsh.
Just very quickly, Chairman, thank you. I do think that your scrutiny committee's got a heck of a lot of substitutes today, and I think us and the substitutes really shouldn't be setting your programme for you. It should be the members of your committee. So I agree with the recommendations.
Thank you. Okay. Right. Can I have your... you're happy with that? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Eggleton.
Well, funnily enough, I was just, when I was making my notes earlier today, that Councillor Marsh wrote to you regarding health provision, and perhaps it's worthwhile. You did?
I did, Chairman.
The question is, were you satisfied with the outcomes, or is this something that we should be further examining in more depth? I also think that perhaps we should be considering meeting more frequently. I note that we have a form by which councillors can suggest meetings to yourself, Chair. I was just wondering whether this could be turned into an electronic format rather to minimise your paper workload as part of the SharePoint folder that's currently under construction. That way we don't have to deal with as much paperwork.
Thank you. Would you like to answer that?
Yeah, is that all right?
Sorry.
So Councillor Egerton, on the first point, I think, as you know, we do a constitution review annually, which is a subsidiary of council, and council approves that report, and the meeting frequency is part of that. So I think that there is a mechanism for considering that, and the group felt very strongly this year that a new set of processes and new scrutiny committees had only had a year to bed in, and it was working well, and they wanted to continue as is. So that's what dictates the number of meetings. And I think, if I may go back on Councillor Marsh's point, in terms of the matters that come before this committee, the budget's sort of not optional, so that's definitely
I'll go
on
with
there.
that one.
I'm very happy to make the form digital, and my colleague Sam in the corner will be delighted to hear that, but we will of course retain other mechanisms for people who prefer all the different formats.
Do you want to say something
Yes,
else?
please. Regarding that provision that thankfully you did take, I must admit it was written in good faith from my planning committee to the monitoring officer, and it did take a hit, but I don't think we addressed all the issues that potentially could have been addressed. If there's any option that could potentially come back, or a written set of questions could be presented, I'm not going to tell you how to run your committee, Chairman, but I have been given some flack by some of the members, shall we say. They weren't that happy with it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Judy, would you like to come back on?
Yeah, just to remind the committee that the ICB, the Integrated Care Board, did actually come along and address the whole of the council. If you recall, we have discussed many times different formats, different fora to provide members with a good opportunity to have a debate and a discussion. And given how important that matter was, it was decided that it would be a workshop, a briefing for all members, and the ICB did say that they would be willing to come back if invited to provide further updates as they go through their reorganisation and their processes.
Right, Councillor Cornish. Thank you, Judy. Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if it's possible to add a progress report to scrutiny for the LC whips and the active travel. Would that fall into this remit at all?
Judy?
Just to remind the committee that whilst we have sought to probably play a larger role than statutorily entitled to, and we have sought to influence the LC whips and active travel actually is a matter for West Sussex County Council. If we wanted more information on that matter, then we could perhaps ask the County Council to provide that.
Could we do that?
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. So can we go to the recommendation? Okay. The committee is recommended to confirm the proposed work programme for the municipal year 2024-25 and beyond. Note the alternative approaches by which scrutiny may receive information and consider matters as approved on the 27th of September 2023, and to note the process for scrutiny members requesting via the chairman further topics to be considered by the committee as approved on the 27th of September 2023. Can you vote with your buttons, please? That's 11 yes, no, nil, abstain, nil. Thank you very much. So I can now go to the one that I read out before. Questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10.2, due notice of which has been given. I have none. Thank you all for attending, and I close the meeting at just gone 10 to 8. I can't see our clock anymore.
No, I know it's gone.
It's gone.
There's one over there.